My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, there is a question that all of us ask in one way or another when we suffer, and especially if we go through serious suffering. And that question is, where is God? Where is God in this suffering of mine? This is an ancient question. In Psalm 76, the question is asked kind of dramatically, will the Lord reject us forever? Will he show us his favour no more? Has his love vanished forever? That is the great fear that we can have, that the love of God has vanished. Because when we suffer, when we are persecuted perhaps, we feel he is absent, and we feel perhaps that his love has vanished forever. And in today's Gospel, Jesus gives a description of just such suffering, terrible suffering in fact, of Christians at the end of time, mixed in with a kind of description of the Christians suffering, and the Jews, with the attack on Jerusalem by the Roman soldiers led by Titus in the year 70 AD, when the city ends up being completely destroyed and of course the temple leveled. It's a terrible tragedy. And at that time, certainly the Jewish people could have felt that God's love was gone, and the Christians too. But Jesus is also speaking about you and me and all the things that we undergo during the course of our lives, and that feeling that perhaps God is gone. So Jesus gives, I'm not going to read it because it's quite long, but gives a long description of when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, and the terrible bloodshed of those days in 70 AD. And then Jesus also speaks about the end of times, when there'll be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and nations will be in agony, men dying of fear, and so on. It makes me think of our Lord's words himself on the cross, Eloi, Eloi lama sabachthani, my Lord, why have you forsaken me? It seems that even Jesus seems to be suggesting that the love of God has abandoned him. But we know, in fact, that's Psalm 22, and those words go on to reaffirm the conviction that, in fact, no, even though I undergo all these things, and I'm tempted to think that I have been forsaken, but no, God's love is with me all the time. There's a nice story that is told, I came across it somewhere, of a boy who'd been caught in an earthquake, maybe when he was at school, and the rescuers were digging through the rubble for a long time to try to get at him anyway, and others maybe that were there. But his father joined in, and his father kept at it much longer. And when the rescuers were essentially attempted to give up, the father didn't, and he kept going until finally he found his boy, and he knew where he would be in the class, and so he knew where to look. And the very first thing, when the boy heard his father's voice calling to him, the boy said, "Dad, I knew you wouldn't give up." Very nice, lovely. And you can imagine the boy there with that conviction, even though in that terrible situation, but that conviction, my dad loves me so much, he's not going to give up. And so the same with us. We have to be like that little boy, at times perhaps feeling that we're buried under the rubble, and yet God our Father loves us so much that he doesn't give up on us. And this is the way Jesus finishes this gospel passage. He says, "And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand erect, hold your heads high, because your liberation is near at hand." It's kind of the exact same thing. Jesus saying, I don't give up on you. Though you go through those tribulations, and at whatever period in history and whatever period in our lives, we can go through these tribulations. The love of Christ is there the whole time. It may appear to be absent, but it's not. St. Paul, who in fact personally, of course, had experience of many tribulations, many persecutions, beatings, stonings, arrest, all these things. And of course, at any point he could have said, well, Lord, where are you? Where are you in all of these sufferings? But he has this lovely passage writing to the Romans. Nothing can come between us and the love of Christ. Even if we are troubled or worried or being persecuted or lacking food or clothes or being threatened or even attacked. These are the trials through which we triumph by the power of Him who loved us. So him speaking, St. Paul speaking from his own personal experience and conviction, a fellow who had been persecuted, sure lacked food and clothes, was threatened and attacked, all these things, and we can almost hear him saying, but in all this I never gave up on the love of Christ, the power of Him who loved us. Let's ask our Lord in this brief time of prayer, give me that conviction, Lord. Help me to realize that nothing can become between you and me and your love. That nothing can stand between me and your love for me. It's so powerful. The love of God is so powerful. In fact, it's so primordial, really, that God loved us into existence. And not only that, we are kept in existence by the love of God. So it's impossible. The very fact that we exist is a proof, as it were, of God's love. We're sustained in existence by the love of God. And then all this love which Jesus promises us, so we'll never be lacking. And not only that, those trials, those tribulations, are means through which we triumph, as he says. Today is also the feast of St. Andrew Dung Lac companion martyrs. Over 100 martyrs over a period of time in Vietnam. They suffered terribly, in fact. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. There was over 200,000 martyrs over a little over 2 centuries in Vietnam. And they suffered under one particular king who was called the Nero of Vietnam. So that certainly doesn't sound very reassuring. And really terrible persecutions. But those Vietnamese martyrs, they really had that conviction. They went to their death joyful, as St. Paul did, convinced nothing can come between us and the love of Christ. Well, let us too be strengthened that conviction. No matter what is happening, nothing can come between us and the love of Christ. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.